When a self-righteous HOA tried to bully our quiet lakeside cabin, they made a mistake that would echo across the entire county. They sent a fake cop to teach us a lesson. But the man he tried to intimidate wasn't just my brother. He was a sitting U.S. senator on vacation. The lake had always been our family's sanctuary, a quiet retreat surrounded by tall pines, just far enough from town to forget the noise. My brother David and I had spent summers here since childhood, skipping rocks, fishing off the dock, and sitting by the campfire long after the stars came out. But adulthood changes things. I went into environmental engineering. David went into politics, a smart, steady talker who could command a room without raising his voice. He was now a U.S. senator, and he still came back to our cabin every year to unplug from Washington. Only this time, peace didn't last long. 3 months earlier, a new housing development had sprouted on the opposite side of the lake, Maple Ridge Estates, complete with cookie-cutter mansions and the worst thing imaginable for any rural community, a power-hungry HOA. The president, Karen Lunt, was infamous before we even met her. Local shopkeepers warned us about her, the kind of person who thought her clipboard gave her legal authority over airspace. At first, we ignored her letters. Your dock extends into shared waters. Noise complaint from your evening bonfire. Unauthorized structure, the boathouse, visible from HOA property. Every one of them was nonsense. The lake was on private land, split between several owners, with no HOA jurisdiction anywhere near our property. Still, Karen escalated. One afternoon, her SUV rolled up to the gravel drive, and she demanded to inspect our cabin for compliance. David met her at the gate. "Ma'am, this land is federally exempt, private family property," he said calmly. "Everything in this community is subject to HOA review," she replied, snapping photos with her phone. "We'll handle this formally." Her formally came 2 days later, a man in a dark uniform, badge glinting in the sun, knocking on our door. He introduced himself as Officer Mills, from Lake County Enforcement Division. He had a badge, a holster, and a clipboard full of citations, none of which looked official. "We've received complaints from the HOA regarding zoning violations," he said flatly. "I need access to your cabin." "Your county law enforcement?" David asked, eyeing the patch on his sleeve. "Wrong color, wrong seal." "That's right," Mills said, but David had been around real officers his entire career. He noticed everything: the cheap belt, the mismatched boots, the badge number that didn't follow state format. Something wasn't right. David invited him in, calm as ever, while I quietly stepped out to call the sheriff's office. The dispatcher's tone changed instantly when I mentioned Officer Mills. "Sir, we have no one by that name. Stay inside." "Deputies are on their way." I slipped back inside the cabin, heart pounding, trying to look normal. Mills was walking around the living room, pretending to jot down violations. "This structure's been modified. See that loft? That's a zoning issue." "You work for the county, right?" David asked again. "That's right. We partner with local homeowner associations on enforcement." David leaned forward slightly, his politician's calm, never wavering. "Mind showing me your credentials, officer?" "I already did." "The real ones." The man froze. That was the moment I knew David had him. He wasn't angry, just studying him, quiet and steady, like he did when cross-examining a bill sponsor. "Sir," David said softly, "I've worked with the state's law enforcement budget committee for 12 years. I know every county department in this district, including the real Lake County Sheriff's Office." Mills's eyes darted toward the door. David straightened up, voice firm now. "You're not law enforcement. So let me guess. Karen sent you?" No answer. Then, faintly in the distance, we heard the distinct crunch of tires on gravel, a convoy of county cruisers, sirens silent but lights flashing. David didn't flinch. He just sipped his coffee and said, "You may want to stay seated. I think someone wants to ask you about that badge." When the deputies entered, everything happened fast. Weapons drawn, clear commands, cuffs snapping shut. Mills was detained without incident. He tried to protest, claiming to be part of a private enforcement contract, but the deputies didn't buy it for a second. Karen's name came up immediately. The fake ID badge, the false citations, even the HOA letterhead found in his folder, all... Traced back to her, she'd hired him. Deputy reports later confirmed that Officer Mills was a disgraced former security guard who'd lost his license years ago. Karen had paid him to intimidate us into compliance, hoping we'd cave and join her HOA or fix the cabin she didn't like seeing across the lake. What she didn't know? The private citizen she tried to bully was Senator David Hall, currently overseeing the State Ethics Committee, the same one that could investigate local corruption. By the next morning, the story broke on local news. Fake officer arrested at Lake Barrow cabin, tied to HOA president's intimidation scheme. The moment cameras showed the footage, the flashing lights, the false uniform, and David stepping out calmly beside the sheriff, the internet did the rest. Within hours, Karen's HOA board called an emergency meeting. The homeowners, already sick of her antics, voted her out unanimously. But the real storm hit when the state attorney general's office stepped in, prompted by David's call. They launched a formal inquiry into HOA abuse of authority, and Karen became the poster child for it. She faced charges of conspiracy, harassment, and impersonation by proxy. All felonies once they proved she'd knowingly sent a fake cop to a public official's home. The news headlines didn't hold back. HOA president tried to intimidate senator, ends up under investigation. For weeks, media vans lined the lake road. Every outlet wanted a quote from the senator who was nearly bullied by his own HOA, but David didn't gloat. He didn't even file a personal suit. He simply stood on the dock during a press interview and said, "This isn't about me. It's about ordinary citizens who face intimidation from people who think power is paperwork and fear. The law protects everyone, not just those who can afford to print rules." That line went viral. It was quoted on evening news, social media, even in political forums. It became a rallying cry for homeowners tired of HOA harassment. As for Karen, her mugshot said it all. Disbelief frozen in her eyes as her empire of petty control collapsed overnight. Her board dissolved within a month. The homeowners petitioned the county to disband Maple Ridge Estates HOA entirely, and they succeeded. The lake was quiet again. On our last night there before returning to the city, David and I sat by the fire, Duke curled beside us. The stars reflected in the water like tiny flashlights, calm, endless, untouched. "You know," I said, tossing a stick into the flames, "you handled that pretty calmly for a guy who got ambushed by a fake cop." "Years in the Senate teach you something," he said with a half smile. "Never argue with someone holding a clipboard. Just make sure they meet someone holding the law." We laughed quietly, the sound drifting across the lake, the same lake that had always been ours. Long before HOAs, headlines, or politics, peace had returned, but so had something better, justice. Because when arrogance knocks on your cabin door pretending to be authority, sometimes the best answer is simply opening it and letting the real law walk in behind you.